Welcome to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. For the next hour, you'll hear proven methods for how to live the multiple income streams dream. Ryan is passionate about helping others discover their gifts and start their own business. He's published 5 books, and his courses and group coaching programs have changed the lives of thousands of students all over the world. Ryan's books include Private Label, The Easy Way, Finding Your Grace Place, and his latest, Streams of Income. And now, here's your host, Ryan Rieger.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Streams of Income radio show. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we are talking to my pastor and friend, David Holland. It was such an honor to have him on. Melaine and I have been friends with he and his wife, Tracy, for several years. Melaine actually goes way back. She met them a long time ago, but they are precious people. I wanted to have David on. Primarily, I wanted to help him promote his books, Praying Grace. So I'm holding all 4 of them right here. He's got Praying Grace, Christmas Grace, Praying Grace for Women, and Praying Grace for Men. They have been a blessing to me, and I want you to get your hands on them because they have just blessed Melaine and I tremendously. It's a fresh revelation about who Jesus is, what he's done for us, and you need these devotionals. They are different than any other devotional you've ever had. I know you can walk into any bookstore and find 100 of them, probably all really good, but these are from a perspective of, how much God loves you, how good he is, how awesome he is, how faithful he is, and that you can live a life full of peace and live a grace-filled life. And so we talked a lot about a lot of stuff. David has an awesome background. He's a ghostwriter. He's helped market large ministries. So he knows a lot about marketing and writing. And so we talked about how to find your passion, how to find your purpose, how to know what you're called to do. We talked about how to publish a book and a lot of different things. You're going to love this episode. I sure did. Go to prayinggrace.com to grab either one or all of these awesome devotionals. And here is my interview with David. David, thank you so much for being on Streams of Income. What an honor.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. Delighted to be with you today.
Yeah, this is fun. I've your first time guest, but let me just tell you publicly, you mean a lot to our family. Thank you so much for all that you and Tracy do for Cup and Table, and for those you guys that are listening. Cup and Table is a small home church that David and Tracy Holland started. Was this you guys 5 years or so now?
6 years ago now. That
6
last
years.
month, yeah.
Yeah, I think Melaine and I were at the first few sessions that you guys had, and then probably 2 years ago or so, jumped right in, and just it's such a special group of people that have that assemble every Saturday, 4 p.m. and get to hear. We can talk about that. I didn't even plan on that, but anything you want to share. I feel like a lot of people I talk to, David, are more and more this home church thing is popping up. And I hear people say that I go to a home church too. And I've had several conversations of people in my community about this. So anything you want to share about home churches and the trends you're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a trend everywhere I go. We're not knocking any other way of doing church. We're not interested in throwing rocks or telling anybody else they're doing it wrong. But we personally, and also a lot of people I've just encountered day to day, have experienced the kind of big church environment. Mm-hmm. My bride and I had basically been in gigantic churches for most of our married life, all of our married life, frankly. And for most of my adult life, I was in a gigantic church, even though I grew up in a small one. Mm-hmm. And I just discovered that people are, at the very level of their souls, hungry for community. Mm-hmm. It used to be, not too long ago, not too many decades ago, people had a number of things they did in their lives that fostered community. They might be a part of a civic club, like the Lions Club or the women's whatever. Mm-hmm. They knew their neighbors. They had other things that they did. And often most churches were small. And all of those provided a sense of community. Yeah. Now, nobody knows their neighbors. Nobody's a member of the bowling league or the Kiwanis Club, and there are almost no opportunities to create community. But if there should be any community, it ought to be in church, right?
Yeah.
So, what house church basically allows and fosters is a real sense of community among a small group of people. So I didn't quit my day job to start the Cup and Table Company, what we call our house church. It's sort of my side hustle. I've got side hustles that we'll end up talking about. We'll talk about my day job, we'll talk about my side hustle, and now we're talking about my side. But the Cup and Table Company, that has been everything I'd hoped it would be. It is a community of people who know each other. So we're known and we know others, walking through the ups and downs of challenges of life, the victories and the defeats together, supporting one another. It requires a willingness to be known. So it's not for everyone. It demands that you not just be a consumer. What a lot of people have experienced with the big church experience is that it tends to kind of turn them into consumers of ministry content, where you hear a great inspiring talk and you hear some great music, and maybe you provide a little offering and then you walk away and you're done. But at that point, you're purely a consumer. And what the house church experience demands really is something that's a little more participatory, something that requires a little bit more engagement. So again, it's not for everyone, but people who are hungry for community, it's a tremendous thing.
Yeah, where would you suggest that, because I guarantee there's people listening like, I want that. How do they even find out if there are any home churches in their area?
There are, and I couldn't off the top of my head give you the address, but there are a couple of places online that have become essentially clearinghouses for identifying house churches.
Okay.
So really, you look for House Church Network or House Church Directory, and there are several great directories online that will let you know if there's a house church in your area that meets, and will allow you to find out more.
I'll find that and post a link in the show notes.
Right.
That's good. Thank you. Well, yeah, like I said before we even hit record, I have no idea where this is going to go, and I didn't plan on talking about house churches, but I really feel like there's a lot of people are hungry for this type of thing, for whatever reason. Maybe even they've been burned out at church for who knows, many potential reasons. Sure. And this might serve, like, really be a blessing to them. So I want to hear your story. I know some of it just by knowing you so long, but my audience doesn't. So take me back as far back as you want to in your journey of all the things you've been doing over all the ministry stuff, the business stuff, ghostwriting, anything that you want to share.
Well, in college, I changed majors about 15 times, which when you do that, it takes about 6 or 7 years to get out of college. But I was just curious about everything and wanted to know, was just one of those curious minds that just couldn't figure out what I wanted to focus on. And ultimately, in those upper division classes, I got a lot of feedback from professors that said, you write well, which planted a seed in my mind that, well, okay, maybe I do have some gift or capacity to learn the craft of writing. And all my life I've been a reader, and I've discovered later in life that I've never met a writer that wasn't a reader. And I always had my nose in a book as a kid. So right out of college, I ended up just walking into an office of a newspaper cold and said, I've got no qualifications, no credentials, but I'm looking for a job, and ended up writing, working at a newspaper, doing a little bit of everything. That led to working in radio, particularly Christian radio at the time, news, weather, traffic, writing commercials, ultimately more on-air stuff. But I was writing daily in my capacity on radio, and a good piece of that was marketing writing. I needed to write radio ad copy. We were a small radio station that we were dependent on the sales guys being able to bring in enough advertising revenue for us to pay everyone's salaries and stay on the air. And so that was a high pressure, direct response, driven, instant feedback environment for advertising, right? Because the local car dealer or the local chiropractor would come in and they would make an ad buy. And if their phone didn't ring, or if people didn't show up on their property, they didn't buy any more ads. And so the pressure was on me to write ad copy that would actually make those phones ring and make people show up on the lot.
You just learned that on your own?
I did. I mean, I've always been kind of a self-taught mode kind of guy anyway. So I read everything I could get my hands on about writing good radio ad copy and direct response advertising. So I went to school there, and then later ended up in writing a different kind of writing. It was in the ministry space, the faith-based space, but doing ghost writing and marketing writing for some of these big television ministries, some of the biggest television ministries in the country that had enormous TV budgets, and which is a hungry hippo to feed. And so I ended up doing a lot of marketing writing and direct response type writing in that space in multiple channels early on in the early days back in the Paleozoic era when I was first starting out. It was primarily print. It was primarily letters, direct response letters, and magazine articles and ads. But soon the internet revolution began, and email became a piece of that. The digital channel became a piece of it, and then obviously in more recent years, the social media piece emerged as well. But at the time, I started learning the craft of again writing, marketing related writing, and ghost writing, which was basically writing letters, books, letters and articles originally, which ultimately evolved into books in other people's voices. So it was in that period of time, right in the transition from radio to print, that I met and married my wife. We started a family right away. And so I was trying to basically feed a family as a writer.
Wow.
So when Tracy and I met, I was doing radio. I was on air, doing a lot of on air stuff. And she asked me one time, as a fiance is likely to do, if you could be doing anything in the world, what would you do? You know, what would be your dream
Great
job?
question. I love that question.
Yeah. And I said, well, to be honest with you, if I could just write my own ticket, excuse me, I would be writing things about that I'm in areas that I'm passionate about, and speaking about them, and letting the speaking support the writing and the writing support the speaking. But I would love to just make a living as a writer. And she'll tell you, she smiled and nodded, but will confess today, at the time she thought, well, how in the world can anybody make a living doing that? You know, how in the world are we going to basically survive as a couple if you were as a writer? How did that even happen? But eventually we jumped out of the boat, and I started making a living as a writer. And over the years we've lived a pretty good, comfortable life on the writing that I've done. A lot of that has been ghost writing. At this point, I've written 38 published books for other people, collaborated with them on their books. I have, there's usually a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement associated with those, so I can't name names. But a lot of people that you may have heard of, a couple of New York Times nonfiction bestsellers along the way. But then it's been 23 years ago now, I took all of that marketing writing related knowledge and moved to Dallas with my wife and kids and started an agency.
Because you guys were in Minneapolis before that, correct?
We've been in Minneapolis. We were in Oklahoma City, then Minneapolis, and then to Minneapolis to Dallas. Okay. And hung out a shingle, essentially, as an agency with a friend whose superpower was more of the television media buying and media production side. And my side was the writing and the content and the creative side. And we hung out a shingle and successfully for 10 years helped nonprofits, particularly faith-based nonprofits and media ministries, do their marketing. Basically speak to their constituencies, market what they needed to market, raise funds for what they needed to raise funds for through all channels. You know, by that time we were moving into that multi-channel, omni-channel world of the internet, where I was not only writing for print, but also writing radio specials and radio spots, television specials, television spots, and a lot of content for the digital channels. Yeah. As well. It's been a learning process all the way. after about 10 years, we folded up shop, and I've rolled what I was doing into a larger agency here in Dallas that has been, and it's been 12 years next month, helping some of the largest media ministries in the country communicate in the ways that they need to communicate, much of that being either marketing or direct response related writing. But a few years ago, I got the opportunity to write some of my own books. Some doors opened up for me to kind of fulfill that dream that I'd mentioned to my wife when we were engaged.
Yes.
Right. That there were some things that were in me that I wanted to get out on paper and see if they helped and encouraged other people. And so a few years ago, that journey began. About 20 years ago, I'd gotten the opportunity to write co-author a couple of books that were biographies for people, which were actually the first ever books I'd written that had my own name on the cover, which was a very exciting thing. But really, it's just been in the last few years that I've really stepped into that lifelong dream of being able to write what I'm passionate about and help other people see some things that I've been seeing. And it's been a pretty exciting couple of years.
So cool. Do you feel like all the stuff before that was just preparation, or how do you look at that? Because candidly, you kind of know my story too, and some of the things that we've talked about at Cup and Table, and even things that have been prophesied over me. And so for some of you listening, you might think that's weird, but it's always been confirmation of things in my heart, and I feel like. So talk to me, because for me, I feel like a lot of the things I've done over the last 20 some years have been preparation for this next step, whatever that looks like, and in my life. But how do you view all those periods of time, all that period of time before, quote, you stepped into what you told Tracy was your dream? Yeah.
Well, what I've seen every step, Ryan, is that everything that preceded it was preparation for the next thing. And I've seen that over and over again. That little bit of newspaper writing I did got me in the door in radio. And just that what I did in radio got me in the door in writing in that faith space. And then, so, God doesn't waste anything. And so now today, I am using the accumulated knowledge, experience, confidence, relationships that preceded it, and every single step has been preparation for the next one, and I'm certainly experiencing that right now.
Do you feel, it seems like also that I'm listening to a guy like you may even know him, but Lance Wallnau he talks about convergence and how you step into your real thing in your life, the thing that you were created for. And it seems like people who are at that stage are older, like in their, I'm in my late 40s. And it's people that are in their late 40s, 50s, 60s before you actually step into the thing for your life. Is that normal? Or can you be 20 years old and doing the thing you were called to do?
I think it's possible, but I think we're living in a era in which a lot of things were delayed later than they were in previous generations. People are delaying marriage, they're delaying childbearing. I think to a certain extent, I think a lot of people don't even really know who they are until they're about 24.
Right.
It's really kind of unfair that we force kids to go to college at 18, and it really you're not even really sure who you are until you're 23 or 24 years old. And your all the brain wiring is finally fusing and connecting, and all the synapses are in place. And it was certainly the case for me. I was about 24 when I started to realize, okay, I think I know who I am. And I think I know what I'm wired to do, where my joy is going to be, where my sense of purpose and destiny and all of that's going to be. So I think that whole thing has been sliding later and later, which may mean why we're seeing the phenomenon that you're describing, which I think is valid. I think another piece of it, although you're still in the early child rearing phase, but for a lot of us, there's sort of something about those child rearing years that require a whole lot of attention, a whole lot of energy, mind space, a whole lot of money. And so there's something about kind of getting toward the back end of that season that frees up. First of all, you've been accumulating experience, you've been accumulating knowledge and confidence. And at the same time, you gain mind space, and maybe even a little financial margin. Although kids in college is an interesting phenomenon. Right. I did 3 in college at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
And then did 3 weddings within 5 years as well, because we had 3 daughters.
And I know it was books that carried you through that, right? Ghostwriting projects.
It was my side hustles that made things like the college and the weddings possible, which is very much a part of my story. And thank God for those the extra streams of income, right?
Yes.
But there is something about that I think gives you a little bit more margin to really be able to step in. And if you believe that God is guiding your steps and guiding the pathways of your life and leading you into paths, it might make sense that this happens a little bit later in life. It'd be great if at 22, and some people that's their story, right?
Sure.
They know by 18 what they're going to do, and by 22 they're in the lane they're going to run in, and they're running hard. And I think that's great when that happens, but that's not the norm.
Yeah, it's not been my story. I get emails from people that are older than me, and they tell me they still don't know what they're called to do, what their purpose is. Do you have any insight on that? What you would tell somebody if you were sitting in front of them doing a pastoral consultation, and somebody tells you, let's say they're 55 years old, and like, David, I really don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Like I'm at a job that I hate. I know there's more for me, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm wired to do. What would you tell that person?
Well, I mean, this question is a little bit of a cliche, but it became a cliche because it's a really, really valid, powerful question. And the question is, what would you do if money were no object? If you won the lottery tomorrow and you didn't have to work anymore, what would you spend your days doing?
Yes.
That's a clarifying question.
Yes, it is.
Because it helps you understand, where your passions are. I don't know if you're familiar with there's a Japanese concept of ikigai.
Yes.
And, it can be demonstrated by a Venn diagram that's got 4 spheres that overlap, but it's, and I won't remember them accurately, but it's, what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for. And there's a 4th sphere. I can't remember where it is, but it's a pretty clarifying model to just look, and when you find where those 4 spheres overlap, and the tricky one is what people will pay you for.
Correct.
There's a lots of things about what you're passionate about, what you're good at, what the world needs.
Right.
Where those 3 things intersect is one thing. What people will pay you for is the big piece of the puzzle there, right?
Yeah.
And what I discovered early on is that where all of those things intersected for me in that middle season of my life was ghostwriting.
Yeah.
The world needed it. I was good at it. I got joy out of it, and people would pay me for it.
Yeah.
And so I've lived, particularly as my both for my day job and my side hustles over the last 25 or 28 years in the center of those 4 spheres. But now what I'm trying to build is to see if people will pay me for writing what I want to write.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm good at it. I know there's value in it. I know the world needs it. The question is, and goes to, in part, how effective I am at marketing myself as a client, having myself as a client. Will people pay me for it? And that's the thing. Often, there's the old joke about the cobbler's kids having the worst shoes in town. I've worked marketing wonders by the grace of God for lots of other clients over the last 30 years and helped grow their enterprises. But now, for a certain slice of my time every day, I've got myself as a client.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how good I serve that client.
Well, I'm always happy to help you out. I have a huge audience, but being on this podcast helps. Finding other people like me who have a podcast to have your audience in their audience but you also got a lot of connections too. So depending on which ones you're able to leverage, that'll definitely help a lot.
I need your help, Ryan. Please.
Happy to do it anytime. I love helping people grow their ministry and their business. Wow. Okay. So ghostwriting, like how, man, there's so many places we could go, but most people listening probably aren't going to get into ghostwriting, but, talk about the marketing side of like books. And you mentioned early before we jumped on here, like, written versus ebooks versus audio books, things you're seeing there. Any tips on marketing a book? Because I do have a lot of people in my audience that have written books or that want to write a book. And most of them are probably going to go the self-published route, like using Amazon and getting up there. But once it's there, doesn't mean anybody's going to ever find it.
Yeah. Well, for a lot of businesses, for a lot of entrepreneurs, having some book or booklet type material can be really helpful. Yeah. It can become a premium that you offer in exchange for an email address. The great thing about a physical book is that when you offer a physical book, you capture both an email address and a physical address. Yeah. And which is a more robust way to do marketing, to have both rather than just an email address.
Yeah.
But increasingly, I'm seeing entrepreneurs that have a need for having some written resources that they can provide, even if they're only digital written resources. Yeah, that might be a downloadable PDF or something like that. There are some. Let's just talk meta trends for just a moment.
Sure.
From just at a 30,000 foot standpoint, the whole book world is changing. The whole publishing financial model is changing. Of course, the internet has upended everything, and then social media has upended it again. But fewer and fewer people want to read. That's one trend. And people's attention span for written material is getting shorter and shorter. Back in the day, people read books, and then the 10,000 different magazines came out, so people would read magazine articles, but not books. And then they would read blog posts, and then social media
shorter and shorter and shorter, right?
And so now, it's hard to get some people to read anything longer than a 240 character Twitter post, right?
Right.
But what we're finding is that people will read if it's shorter and broken up into more bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
So like all the books I'm writing now tend to be shorter in word count and have more chapters. Which creates a little bit more bite-sizey, nuggety way of for the reading experience. But there's a significant number of people that just aren't going to read. They just prefer strongly media content. Yeah. They want video or audio. So it's no accident that the audiobook space is growing by about 20 or 25% a year.
Wow.
So right now, everything I'm writing, I'm trying to also get it available as an audio book. There's a period of time, probably about 5-6 years ago, everybody thought that ebooks was just going to kill the physical book market, and it didn't happen. Yeah. It briefly knocked a dent in the demand for physical books, but then it sprung back to the fact that ebooks, some people do prefer ebooks, but a lot of people who still read still want a physical book in their hands.
Yeah.
But the audiobook space is actually absolutely growing rapidly. There's a reason why if you go on a website, like, for example, the guys at ESPN, a Disney-owned property, they're pretty savvy. You go to ESPN, and every article you click on has a video at the top you can play or the written form of the article below.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's because, some significant portion of the world is never going to click play. They want to read.
Yeah.
I'm in that shrinking segment. And there's a significant and growing segment of the world that's never going to read the article. They'll always push play.
Yeah.
Always.
You can reach both with the same content.
Exactly. And if you're only providing one form or the other, you're leaving out a significant chunk of your potential content consumer, right? So that's a trend that we're seeing. It used to be that the publishers, the big publishing houses, just owned the marketplace for publishing. So if you were a writer, you had to hope that you could maybe get an agent and submit a manuscript and get them to pick up your book. And that was really the only pathway to publishing. Well, now that's been completely democratized.
Yeah.
So that there are so many different pathways to publishing now. And the scenarios in which it actually makes sense to go that traditional publishing route, it's just shrinking by the day.
Yeah.
There are some scenarios in which that still makes sense. But the only reason it makes sense to go that traditional publishing route today is for prestige. There's a certain amount of it's legacy, it's residual prestige and seeming, in the eyes of some people, credibility and credentialing that happens if you've been published by a major publisher. Rather than self-published. There's still a little bit of a residual stigma associated with self-publishing. But that's not an economic reason. It's the economics of it is secondary or tertiary. For purely economic standpoint, self-publishing or some sort of hybrid approach is absolutely the way to go. And the pathways to self-publishing, and if you're endeavoring to learn how to market yourself online, it's absolutely the way to go. And so right now I've got a foot in several worlds. I've got some things I'm self-publishing, 3 of my books out right now for reasons that are too complicated to go into right now, went the traditional publishing route. I've got one hybrid book out, and I have a number of self-published books in the pipeline.
Which ones are Praying Grace? Is that self-published, or does somebody else do that?
Praying Grace for Men, and Praying Grace for Women, all 3 are published through a traditional publisher.
Oh, I see that. Okay, Broad Street. Yep.
Christmas Grace is a hybrid approach where I own the intellectual property. I own basically the book, but I've inserted it into a publisher's distribution network that gets it on Amazon. It gets it on the various other channels, and they take a piece of the retail sales price. But it's still a much more lucrative approach than the pitiful royalty you'll get through a traditional publisher.
So essentially, like we compared Praying Grace for Men versus Christmas Grace, holding both of them, you're going to make more money on Christmas Grace then?
No question.
Because it's yours.
No question about it. Yeah. And it's because the distribution partner on that is taking a much smaller piece. What the traditional publishers will say was, all you have to do is give us your manuscript. We're going to spend all the money. We're going to be out of pocket on the design. We're going to be out of pocket on the layout. We're going to be out of pocket on the printing. We're going to have to warehouse the things. Then we're going to put it into our distribution network. But you're only going to get, out of a retail book that's $20 online, you're going to get $1.50, $1.75 per copy, or something like that, as a royalty on that. But you're out of pocket nothing. But with a hybrid approach, the author is often out of pocket for the printing and the layout and the design aspects of it. The good news is that in the age of digital printing, it used to, you had to print 5,000 or 10,000 units of something to get the cost remotely down to where they were reasonable per unit. But now in the age of digital printing, you can print 500 or 1,000 and not have a garage full of bookcases, right? And not be out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars. But even Amazon will do print on demand right now if you want to. They'll just print 1 or 2 copies at a time. The margins, the author margins on those are obviously much skinnier. So the risk reward on it is you're out of pocket to get the book designed and printed, but once it goes into somebody else's distribution channel, the bite they're taking out of that margin is much smaller. So what comes back to you, the author, is significantly larger.
Yeah.
And then the full self-published approach is you're out of pocket for all the costs. You've got boxes of books in your garage or your spare bedroom, but you're marketing them yourself online. You're either got a fulfillment partner or you're fulfilling them yourself, but you're taking 100% of the net on it.
Yeah.
So it's all a function then at that point of how skilled are you at getting on people's radar and creating demand for your book.
Exactly. Yeah. My book has always been my lead magnet. I've never been at a point where my book is like, "Ooh, I made a ton of money on that."
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you're in a different position. But mine for me, like what you mentioned, is a lead magnet into my world.
Yeah. And I think almost everyone should have one of those.
Yeah.
Should have a book or booklet that becomes the lead magnet that puts people into your funnel so that they can begin the relationship process.
Do you still feel like saying I'm a published author is like 20 years ago? Wow, that's amazing. 40 years ago, amazing. You have a book. That's incredible. Nowadays, if I tell somebody I have a book, is that still as impressive? I mean, it's probably less impressive than it was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like we're still in the age where it's impressive to say you're a published author.
It still carries some weight. Yes. It does. It not as you suggest, not as much as it used to, but there's still some weight associated with that. Even just having gotten a book written, for most people, anyone who finds out that I write books for a living or that I'm an author says, "Well, I think I've got a book in me," and I've never met anyone who didn't think they had a book in them. Yeah. But for most people, the process of getting a book written feels like a magical, mystical, miraculous thing.
Yeah.
And that just is impossibly hard to do. And of course, anything that you haven't done seems impossibly hard.
Sure.
Of course, I've put in the 10,000 requisite hours for mastery of that kind of thing. But what I discovered after writing marketing letters for organizations, that if I just put together the equivalent of 3 or 4 marketing letters, I had a chapter.
Yes.
And then if I put together 10 or 12 or 14 chapters, I had a book. It's just, putting one foot in front of the other until you've got enough words on the page.
Yeah.
But it still carries some weight. And I think there's a significant number of people who still find value.
Yeah. Random question. You obviously read a lot. So I enjoy reading a physical book as well versus an ebook. I have ebooks and I've read them, but I much prefer something I can highlight, mark up. Do you have any tips for going the information's here, but if I haven't read this book in 6 months, I may forget everything that's in it. Do you have any tips for gleaning information from a nonfiction book that you're trying to read it to gain a skill, learn something so that you can reference it quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, to your first observation about ebooks versus physical books, here's how I've landed on that. If it's a book I think I'm going to want to keep and reread or reference again, I always get a physical book.
Yep.
If it's some book that I just know if I'm going to read it, I'm going to get whatever the point is in it, and I'm never going to reference it again, I'll save a little money and get the ebook.
Yeah.
And I've still got it.
That makes sense.
But I've got behind me shelves and shelves of books, and they're all around me here, if you could see, of books I've accumulated, and I go back to them time and again. But what I wish I'd known 20 years ago 30 years ago when I started accumulating this library, is that I always now read with a pen in my hand. And what I begin to do is on one of there's usually some blank pages at the front or the back of the book. I not only underline and highlight, I start creating my own index in the front or the back of the book.
Nice.
So that when I find a nugget of something that I just think, okay, that's something I'm going to want to remember, want to come back to. This is a real great takeaway from that book.
Yeah.
I'll go to that page and then basically put a bullet point right there and then say page 42 and a just quick summary of that takeaway.
Awesome.
And so now the books I've been reading, especially the helpful nonfiction, self-help, how-to, inspirational kind of books, I'm now reading with a pen in hand. And then I can just go back to my index on that, especially if I want to cite that in something I'm writing. I thought, okay, that author, there was this great story anecdote he told that illustrated this point instead of having to thumb through the entire thing trying to find it, I could just go right to the end, my own index.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Wow. That could be a little mini course or something right there, teaching. My friend Dan Miller has a course out about how to take good notes. And he's got a system for being able to remember information that he's read in books because he's a voracious reader as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about Christmas grace praying grace for men and praying grace for women. I want to promote these. I want people that are listening to grab these. Anything you want to share about these books? Why? I guess maybe. Okay, everybody's got well, not everybody. There's lots of devotionals out there.
Sure.
Why are these different? I can tell you why they mean so much to me and why they're refreshing. But in your words, why would you say what sets these apart versus all the other devotionals you can go into a Christian bookstore and grab off the shelf?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question, Ryan. And these books come out of the things that I am most passionate about. When I initially wrote Praying Grace, and it got legs, and God seemed to breathe on it, and some amazing things happened with it. I told people that in this book are the things that I want the people I love the most to know the best. That people like my wife and my children and my grandchildren that are now growing up. I asked myself, what is it that, because I love them dearly and I want them to live a life that's full of peace and purpose and fulfillment and victory and overcoming obstacles and overcoming hardships. What is it that if I love you the most, what do I want you to know the very best?
Yes.
And that's what emerged out of Praying Grace. It's a book that basically stands on three legs. A lot of people have misconceptions about who God is and what he's like.
Mm-hmm.
They have misconceptions about what Jesus accomplished when he came and did all that he did, and they have misconceptions about what that means to them and in them, because there are implications for all three.
Yes,
we all operate logically and reasonably based on what we assume to be true.
Mm-hmm.
But if what we assume to be true is flawed in some way, we end up in places that don't work well.
Yes.
But we come by that honestly because we're operating from some flawed understandings, some flawed premises. So what Praying Grace is designed to do is to use the biblical term, renew your mind, help change your thinking and focus your thinking correctly on the nature of God, that he's good, he's kind, he wants the best for you. He's not capricious. He's not unkind. He's not mean. Those kinds of things. Plus, what Jesus accomplished is better than what we have been told or what we could even possibly imagine. The gospel is called good news.
Yes.
And frankly, I like to say, if you're sharing the gospel with someone and their first response isn't, well, that sounds too good to be true, well, then you're telling it wrong. Because the first response should be, that sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
And then there are some implications downstream for what Jesus accomplished that changes who we are, that changes it changes where we stand. And too many people are operating in lives of shame, in lives of condemnation, lives of feeling disqualified from living God's highest and best. And if you feel disqualified, you're essentially self-disqualifying.
Yes.
So what Praying Grace is designed to do is to change your thinking so that you stop disqualifying yourself for everything that Jesus qualified you for, right? So that book, God really breathed on it, and eventually TBN, the major Christian television network, picked it up and wanted to offer it to all of their viewers and all of their donors. It became, they basically created a 30-minute, essentially, what amounts to an infomercial for it that they still run. The TBN network still runs that 30-minute from time to time because it still moves the needle.
Wow.
So clearly the themes in that 30-minute time frame gives me an opportunity to really unpack the benefits of the book.
You have that? Is that anywhere that I can send a link to for somebody to watch that?
There is.
And you search it on YouTube or something, or go to tbn.com?
It may be available on YouTube, but at tbn.com, they have an on-demand television platform. It's free. They'll require that you give up an email address, like any good marketer would.
Sure.
But you give up an email address and you can access their on-demand platform, and I will send you the link so that you can provide that.
Okay.
And it is it's me being my own client with TBN, trying to help you understand why this book will help you.
Yeah.
But because of that, and here's an interesting phenomenon, and I'm now always with my books, I'm looking for a media partner who wants to basically offer one of my books to their viewing audience, even if they're keeping almost all the margin. Like all the books that TBN sells, I get probably a quarter a book, right? It's not significant. But what we've learned over the years is that when somebody on television offers a resource, but you have to get it through them, a certain number of people will say, okay, I don't want it from you, but you've just made me want it, so I'm going to jump over to Amazon and get it, or some other online platform. So for every one person who decides, okay, TBN, I want that book, and they get it, they give up some money, I get a quarter, there are probably two who will jump over to Amazon and get it, and I get the larger margin for it. So I'm making bulk sales to these large distributors, but because they've got a big media platform and they're giving visibility to the book, it lifts what I'm doing over on Amazon or on my website.
That's awesome.
So that's a win. It's
sure.
Definitely a win, even though the direct sales, the margins are really, really skinny.
Yeah.
So through those kinds of ways, now over the last 3 years, there are more than 200,000 copies of Praying Grace out there circulating. To put that into perspective, in the Christian book marketplace, there's an association called the Christian Booksellers Association, where all the major publishers gather. The typical faith-based title published last year sold 2,200 copies.
Wow.
Of the book. So there's a lot of publishers out there throwing a lot of mud against the wall in hopes that something will stick and become the next runaway bestseller, the next The Shack or Purpose Driven Life or Prayer of Jabez or whatever. They don't know what's going to be the next big thing, so they just throw as much mud against the wall as they possibly can. But while they're doing that, they're creating all these published titles that sell 2,000 or 3,000 copies.
Wow.
It's so the fact that Praying Grace now has 200,000 copies in print and growing by the month is gratifying, to say the least. So in the wake of that success, Broad Street Publishing requested two follow-ups to that, one specially for men and one specially for women. And so I created those last year. The women's book came out in April. The men's book came out in October. And so those are out there now doing their thing, and I feel really good about them. They take the similar kinds of help and encouragement that the first one provides, but specifically focus it on the unique masculine and feminine challenges that we face in the world. And the messaging is specifically tuned to both men and women.
Well, but where do you want people to go to? Because I want them to buy these books. Where's the best place for them to go? Thank you.
There's sort of a portal to all of it at prayinggrace.com.
Got it.
That's basically just a little sales funnel or portal that will link you to all 4 of the books and take you where you need to go to be able to get them. Thank you for that.
Of course, my pleasure. They've been a blessing to Melaine and I, and so I just wanted to. The world needs to hear it. I mean, 200 thousand people are hearing it, but we need more people because it is refreshing, David. I know you know all the other messages that are out there, and a lot of it's easy to take what God has done for us and turn it into law. Like, I've got to do this and I got to do this. I got to keep this commandment. I got to make sure I'm doing this right. And yeah, you want to live a holy life, but I feel like God gives you that grace to do it. And you talk about right here how to live that life almost effortlessly because you're relying on Him to work in and through you to make it possible.
Yeah. If you feel like you have to qualify in your own efforts and your own strength, you'll never get over that bar.
No, never.
Your own inner critic and the enemy of your soul will never let you get over that bar.
Yeah.
And it's impossible anyway.
Yes.
But once you move over into understanding that Jesus is your qualification and that all you have to do is be in Him, and you're flowing in His strength, you're flowing in His enablement, and you basically accessed His qualification.
Yes.
It's basically like, we have a key card entry system that we're in my day job. And so you can't get in the door unless you've got the key card. Well, basically, this is like Jesus giving you His key card. It gets you in, because you're getting in on His credentials. You're getting in on His qualification. So, I also write and blog. I've got probably 18 years worth of writing about life, faith, family, culture, current events over at my blog at davidaholland.com.
Got it.
And it's a place where you can find more of my short form writing. At some point in the future, hopefully with your help, I'm going to convert davidaholland.com into a more sales and e-commerce friendly platform that will allow me to market some e-courses that will take people in the e-course format through the very kinds of things that you learn through the books.
Yes.
Got more books in the pipeline. And so looking forward to that.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being on with me. This is a pleasure. Anytime you ever want to jump back on, if you ever have a message you want to share to the audience, you just say, hey, I want to be on, and let me know, and we'll do it again.
I'll take you up on that. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. From right here in the Dallas Metroplex, Ryan teaches several entrepreneurial courses and group coaching programs to students all over the world. Be sure to listen next week at the same time for Streams of Income with Ryan Rieger.